is, and we should be good with it.
There are new developments in the investigation into the January 6th attack on Capitol Hill. Representative and Select Committee member Liz Cheney says the panel does have enough confidence to refer Donald Trump for criminal charges, but has yet to decide whether to send the referral to the Justice Department. NBC's Ali Rafa is on Capitol Hill for us.
All right, before we hear from Ali Rafa, let me tell you, this is another live stream from the Great American Mail, interpreting the news of the day and the happenings of the day through the lens of the Constitution, the law, and history. Tonight, we're going another January 6th special. You're going to want to subscribe to this channel. We're going to be covering January 6th all week. We're going to live stream it when the hearings start. January, this Thursday. Anyway, we're going to go over tonight and analyze whether or not Donald Trump committed a crime on January 6th. We're going to go through a Democrat judge's opinion, I should say a judge's opinion. It's the same opinion you've been hearing from everyone that says that Donald Trump more likely than not committed a crime on January 6th. Now, we are limiting this not to some other crime. We are limited simply to Donald Trump's decision to challenge Biden's certification on January 6th, the so-called Eastman plan. You've heard about it everywhere elsewhere. Also, by the way, if you look at last night's video, we did the January 6th hearings part 1. This is part 2. Last night we covered what January 6th was about. If you want to check that video, it's about 20 minutes long. Breaking it down for you very simply, it's about the Capitol rally that got out of control. We're not going to get into why, whether it's false flag or not. It's just that's part of it. The other part of it is Donald Trump was going to challenge Biden's certification in the Electoral College on January 6th. If you want to hear about that, go watch that video and come back. It's take about 20 minutes to walk you through the election of 1800. We walk you through the Electoral Count Act of 1887, the 12th Amendment, a bunch of things you have to understand this. Now, the left is convinced that Donald Trump committed a crime on January 6th. Now, we're not talking about the potential incitement charge, which is also bogus, but we're not talking about that. We may do one on Brandenburg versus Ohio and break down the case. And another thing the Great American Mail does that you don't get on other things is, in fact, let me pull this up while I'm speaking here. We are going to go through the actual opinion. All right, that is the opinion right there, Eastman versus Thompson. We're going to go through that. I've got it all marked up, highlighted. I don't have it in there now, but I'll drop a link to the opinion. In fact, you know what? I'll do better than that. I'll show you how to get the opinion if you want to get it when we go over that. But let's get back to the folks over there. This is NBC News, the intelligence agency's people there. And let's see what they have to say about Donald Trump and committing a crime, and then we're going to come back and walk you through the actual facts and the law of that opinion and show why the judge was incorrect. So let's get back in and listen to MSNBC.
This hour. What's holding up the decision here? What's the thinking behind it?
Well, Yasmin, there could be a few reasons behind this, but first I really want to point out how significant this could be if it does happen. You and I have talked about members of Trump's inner circle that the committee has sent criminal contempt referrals to the Justice Department, but as close as the committee has been able to probe, the former president himself has remained largely unassociated with this, not called upon. And now, as you said, Committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney is saying that the committee does have enough evidence to send at least one criminal referral to the Justice Department about the former president. Listen to part.
All right, there you heard right there. So we may come back and listen to that, but I'm trying to keep these short so people can get in and get out pretty quickly. Again, this is from April the 10th. So we're not talking, not too long ago. Now, I covered this on our Substack page. I've got a link tree in there. If you, again, want to subscribe here, great. If you want to listen to our podcast, we've got a daily podcast, a bunch of other things. You can look in the link tree. One of the things the link tree will get you to is this article, our Substack page, Great American Mail. It's M-A-I-L, not M-A-L-E, GreatAmericanMail.substack.com. All right, if you go there, this will bring you, not to this, but it'll bring you to the actual page. If you scroll down, on April 30th, we published this article. No, Trump didn't commit a crime on January 6th. That is essentially the written version of what I'm about to go through here. If you scroll down, again, you go to GreatAmericanMail.com, go to that article published on April 30th. If you scroll down, you will see right here, I think it's the third paragraph. Here it is right here in the third paragraph. It says, on March 28th, 2022, Judge David O. Carter of the United States District Court, right here, see that? I've just highlighted it for you. He's a Clinton judge, all right? If you go there and you click on the ruled, bammo, there is the opinion right there that we're going to go over in a minute. Now, mine's going to look a little different. Okay, but it's the same exact wording. Everything is there to the version that we've got that I've marked up. So, all right, without further ado, let's get to the law. I've got to pull up my Microsoft Word page, and now we should be there. Drop that there. All right, so this is, let me set this up, what this is about. This made all the headlines. And again, the yellow that you see here and the red and the bolds and the italics, these are things that I've gone ahead and marked up for you so that you can follow along very easily with me. This is Eastman versus Thompson. Eastman is the attorney, all right? John Eastman, he represented the President of the United States. He was asserting privilege in terms of giving some documents to the committee. All right, who's Thompson? Well, that's Benny Thompson. He's the head of the illegal, unconstitutional January 6th committee. Speaking of, again, I shouldn't be pushing all these videos, but if you look back maybe a week ago, we did a video on whether the January 6th committee is constitutional. All right, you should check that out if you want to understand. Again, very same thing. We go right through the law like we do here. We just show you the words on the page and help you interpret it. So I've got here, it's highlighted March 28th, so it wasn't that long ago, 2022. He considered this. David O'Carter, you can look it up. He's a Clinton appointee. He's a Democrat. And as we go through this opinion, you're going to see he's a very, very partisan Democrat at that, which I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself there, but I'm not. So if we look further into the opinion, let me back it up. Let me explain what's going on here. So Eastman is asserting privilege. Now, you do not have an attorney-client privilege if you are breaking the law. If you are conspiring with your attorney to break the law, there's no privilege. So the committee has said, hey, judge, we want you to make him give us these documents. He's refusing. So he's given us some documents, but the documents that are between your attorney, they're a privilege. You can't get those, right? There are other kinds of privileges, but we're not getting into that today. We're just talking about the attorney-client privilege. Now, there's so-called crime fraud exception would be a reason the court would say, no, it's not privilege if you're engaged in a crime. So first, the committee has to come in and you basically do a little mini trial, okay? And you do this mini trial, you file a motion to get these the privilege set aside, and you have to prove under the civil standard it's more likely than not beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump and his attorney are engaged in a crime, and if that's the case, whammo, the documents are no longer privileged. That's exactly what happened here on March 28, 2022. The judge says, you know what? I believe more likely than not you were committing a crime. Because you were committing a crime, therefore, the documents aren't privileged. Now, the media ran wild with this to suggest that a judge had said that Trump more likely than not committed a crime. So you wonder to yourself, what is the crime? Now, when I first saw this headline, I thought, well, maybe they're talking about he went in there and looked at the First Amendment stuff, the Brandenburg versus Ohio, incitement, right? There are certain limitations to freedom of speech. It's, again, I hate to quote the president on this, but quote unquote, he says all the time certain things amendments aren't absolute. He's wrong about that. They are absolute. But the interpretation of them means that there are some things you can't do. So you cannot incite people to violence, right? You cannot break copyright laws, right? There are time, place, and manner restrictions. So there are some things the Supreme Court has decided, but we're not here to talk about incitement. We may do one on, I don't think the committee's going there. That's why we're not covering that. I don't think the committee's going to try to go to incitement because they would lose. There's just no chance for that. So here's what they allege, all right? So the select committee right here, bottom left-hand corner, I'm circling it there. The select committee alleges the crime fraud exception applies based on 3 offenses. So they're going to suggest that Donald Trump didn't just commit a crime, he committed 3 crimes, okay? What's the first one? President Trump attempted to obstruct Congress's proceeding to count electoral votes on January 6th in violation of 18 U.S.C., and we'll scroll back up because this is dual column, 18 U.S.C. 1512. All right, so that's one. Number 2, President Trump, plaintiff Dr. Eastman, and several others entered into an agreement to defraud the United States by interfering with the election certification process in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 371. President Trump and members of his campaign engaged in common law fraud in connection with their efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. Now, folks, you're going to need to know them. We're going to go through them one by one here, and I'm going to tell you now, to keep this short, I'm only going to go through one. But I'm going to tell you what happened with 2 and 3. All right, it's pretty simple. Once you understand the first one, because that's where he spends most of his time, you basically know where he's going with the other 2. So the first one is obstruction of an official proceeding. So let's go through and see. And I want you to understand before I start with this, okay, where we are in the United States, and this is really troubling. We are at a point in the United States of America where we are conducting show trials. If you remember the first impeachment especially, it was a show trial. I mean, basically you had a phone call, and you basically you look at the phone call, and well, it wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. It was inflections. We don't do that. That's not the rule of law in the United States. And you're going to see this judge do this here. So let's go through it. Obstruction of an official proceeding. The Select Committee alleges that President Trump violated 18 U.S.C. Section 1512, which criminalizes obstruction or attempted obstruction of an official proceeding. It requires 3 elements. 1, the person obstructed, influenced, or impeded, or attempted to obstruct, influence, or impede. All right, so basically the same thing. An official proceeding in the United States and did so corruptly. Now, folks, this has always been interpreted. Any lawyer will tell you, and anybody trained in laws, and frankly, you don't even need the laws. Your own common sense would tell you that this can't mean that Trump coming in and saying he's going to challenge Biden's certification can't be an obstruction, right? He's exercising the law. And if you go to our video we posted last night and you break down the law and the Electoral Count Act of 1887 and the 12th Amendment, that basically provides. In other words, all you need is your common sense. Why are we having January 6th? Why do we have a procedure where they open the ballots? Why do we have a procedure where a senator and a congressperson under the 12th Amendment, if they object, both houses, the House and the Senate, have to go back to their respective places of business and debate for a minimum of 2 hours? Why is that written in the law? If I exercise that option, or I cause people to exercise that option, how have I obstructed, influenced, or impeded? It's nonsense. It would precisely be if you were to go into a court of law having been charged with a crime, and the judge says, how do you plead? Well, I plead not guilty. And the prosecutor goes, oh, you're obstructing this proceeding. No, I'm not. Obstructing it would be somebody coming in with a gun to try to not proceed and bail me out or something like, or back in the old days when somebody was in jail and they would go in and they would break him out of the jail. That would be obstruction, right? Because that would be physically doing it. And that's the way it's always been understood. It's never been understood that you can obstruct, influence, or impede by merely going through the process that's called for law. But that's where the Democrats are. And this is a typical leftist thing. The communists and fascists have been doing this forever. It's the old saying, what is it? The Romans used to say, don't quote laws to men with swords. But anyway, so let's go through and see. Well, I'm going to demonstrate how he does this very quickly. All right. So he says, Section 1512C2 requires that the obstructed conduct have a nexus to an official proceeding that was either pending or reasonably foreseeable to the person when he engaged in the conduct. President Trump attempted to obstruct an official proceeding by launching a pressure campaign to, and let's go to the next one. It should be there. Campaign to, that's not D. Where is C? There's C. All right. Convince Vice President Pence to disrupt the joint session on January 6th. So the judge says, right, if you go back and you understand what the corrupt proceeding is, let's go back to the beginning, right? It requires 3 elements. The person obstructed, influenced, or impeded, right, an official proceeding in the United States and did so corruptly. So what the judge is saying here is that, let me drop that one back so I don't keep coming up to it. So what the judge is saying here is that by talking to Pence, right, and talking to Pence about what he was going to do, he's obstructing, influencing, or impeding. Now, on its face, it's absurd, folks. It makes no sense at all. He's saying, hey, Pence, when you go out there tomorrow, I'd like you to do this. I'd like you to do that. And again, what we always understood is that meant a bribe, right? That meant going in and physically trying to stop people. That meant like putting a bomb out there to try and impede. It never meant saying, hey, well, I'm going to try to influence you to vote this way or vote that way. If it were, then you'd have people charged with this for going and outside of Congress and merely marching around. Aren't they trying to impede or influence what the Congress is doing? Now, of course, that's not what this meant. Obviously, it meant something more. But unfortunately, the way which it's written, it allows for people to basically drive a Mack truck through it. So let's go through what he's talking about here. President Trump facilitated 2 meetings in the days before January 6th that were explicitly tied to persuading Vice President Pence to disrupt the joint session of Congress. Okay, so 2 meetings, he says. And again, that's my highlighting, the yellow and the red, just so we know where we are. Okay, on January 4th, now we're to the black bolded stuff here. On January 4th, President Trump and Dr. Eastman hosted a meeting in the Oval Office with Vice President Pence, the Vice President's counsel, Greg Jacob, and Vice President's Chief of Staff, Mark Short. At the meeting, Dr. Eastman presented his plan to Vice President Pence, focused on either rejecting electors or delaying the count. So he's saying you should reject electors or delay the count, right? Now, basically, if you know your election law and stuff, and if you've been following the Great American Mail and getting our videos of Florida, Georgia law breaking things down based on the Constitution, the law, and history, you know what the process was, that they were going to try to delay it to the point where the House of Representatives would have to vote on who is president, okay? That's what the Constitution provides. All right, so he goes further. When Vice President Pence was unpersuaded, President Trump sent Dr. Eastman to review the plan in depth with Vice President's counsel on January 5th. Vice President's counsel interpreted Dr. Eastman's presentation on his behalf of the president. So again, the first of the two things is that they had a plan, and Pence was unpersuaded. All right, I mean, how is this possibly obstruction? Okay, but anyway, so basically he's trying to persuade him to do something. Okay, then he goes further. So now we're on this paragraph here on the bottom. On the mornings of January 6th, President Trump made several last-minute revised appeals to Vice President to pressure him into carrying out the plan. Okay. Again, how is that? Think about this, folks. You understand where he's leading. If this type of conduct is going to be an obstruction or influence or impeding, then everything is. Basically, you've got a shadow law. You've got Stalin. Show me the man, I'll show you the crime. Right? Because, I mean, goodness gracious, if I send money to a politician because I support that person, that's trying to influence. I've obstructed Congress. Anyway, all right. At 1 a.m., President Trump tweeted, if Vice President at Mike Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. Mike can send it back, ! At 8:17 a.m., President Trump tweeted, all Mike has to do is send them back to the states and we win. Again, he's advocating for do whatever you have to do when you go up there for the January 6th certification, and if we send it back to the House, then the House votes. Everything's constitutional here. Now, understand, anyway, he goes forward. So that basically, we were on page 18. That was just a different page. We just continued here, okay? So now we're on this is within 2 pages, okay? Anyway, so then he talks about do it, Mike, and then he talks about his speech, right? And he basically, that's really basically all he has, okay? Together, these actions, more likely than not, constitute attempts to obstruct an official proceeding. All right, that's all he's got. Now, we're going to skip ahead. Remember, there were 3 things you had to prove: obstruction, impeding or influencing an official proceeding, and doing so corruptly. So, folks, I don't agree with the judge here, but let's just set this one aside for simplicity, right? He goes on to say it was an official proceeding. Okay, so if you scroll on, you get to page 20. Now, I've highlighted again, so I'm going to pull up 20 here. The same page you saw it. So we're just going to skip it's an official proceeding because I don't think it technically was, but the judge has a lot more leeway on that. So now he gets to the third and final thing. In order for Trump to have obstructed Congress, right, you got to show corrupt intent. So here we go. A person violates Section 1512C when they obstruct an official proceeding with a corrupt mindset. There you go in yellow right there. Now, the red is me, just so we know where we are. The Ninth Circuit, that's where he is. He's in California. It's a district court. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals sits over California, so that's why he's referencing the Ninth Circuit. They set the law for the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit has defined corruptly for purposes of the statute. However, the court has made clear that the threshold for acting corruptly is lower than consciousness of wrongdoing, meaning a person need not know their actions are wrong to break the law. Now, that's fantastic. Okay, so what you're saying is you've expanded influence, obstruct, or impede, right, to infinity, and now you're saying, hey, you don't even have to do so corruptly. That is not a proper reading of that statute. Corruptly clearly intends to anybody that went to law school. Okay, this is why I'm talking about all the time. This is where we're losing our culture. Corruptly obviously means a corrupt intent. In the law, it's called mens rea, right? You have to know what you're doing is wrong. So I don't know why he put those 2 sentences in there, because he didn't really need them, right? Because he's going to go on and say that Trump did do so with an improper mental state. But I point that out to you, folks, just so you understand the type of person that we're dealing with here. All right, the type of judges that we, quote-unquote judges we've got. All right, so here we're now to the next yellow. Because President Trump likely knew that the plan to disrupt the electoral count was wrongful, his mindset exceeds the threshold for acting corruptly under Section 1512. Now, so he says, I don't even have to prove he knew it, but I think he did. So let's figure out, why did Trump have a corrupt mindset? Let's go through again. This is the judge's own words. I haven't changed a thing here. All right, so I'm going to scroll down for the important parts. Although Dr. Eastman argues that President Trump was advised several state elections were fraudulent, the Select Committee points to numerous executive branch officials who stated publicly and privately stressed to President Trump that there was no evidence of fraud. So what he's got is although Dr. Eastman says some people told him it was fraudulent, the committee points to other people that told him it wasn't. Okay, read minds much? So basically Trump got told, again, we're assuming for the argument this is true, which you have to do on this type of emotion. So we're assuming for the sake of the argument that he was told by some people it was fraud and told by others it wasn't. How does that demonstrate a corrupt mindset? Because he chose not to listen to the ones that you believed were honest? Now, folks, you don't have to be a trained lawyer to know that's not right. But he continues. By early, and again, I just kept this all here. No, there it goes. Scroll down to page 21. You can see here, by early January, more than 60 courts dismissed cases alleging fraud due to a lack of standing or lack of evidence, right? Okay, so that's his second point. Now, here's a couple things here, folks, and I'll probably do a live stream at some point, and I'll probably get something up on our Substack page, but it's very difficult to find the law on all these 60 cases, but I think approximately all but one basically did so on technicalities. And again, I'm not doing this for this live stream. I'll do another one. But for purposes of this, you have to understand two things that are critical. One is the courts never looked at the evidence. That's not what they do. They kicked him out usually on standing grounds, which means they basically said, it doesn't matter what you have don't have standing to bring it. So I'm not going to look at it. And then in the second case, he normally got kicked out on a motion to dismiss, which said you don't have the evidence. Well, the problem is until you get to discovery, you can't possibly have the evidence, right? Suffice it to say, the courts aren't set up to do these types of investigations, all right? But here's the bigger point here, folks. Imagine you're Donald Trump, and after the election that you think is fraudulent, in the lead up to it, right, to January 6th, all these courts are saying, hey, you don't have standing, the majority opinion. And, oh, no, we're going to dismiss this because you don't have the evidence of fraud. Well, how am I going to get the evidence of fraud until you give me access to the ballots? No, you can't have access to the ballots until you prove the fraud. Well, I can't prove the fraud until you give me access to the ballots, right? He's doing all this. This is the second point I want to make here. Any rational person might go, oh, the place isn't the courts for me to make this challenge. Apparently, the place for me to make this challenge is to go to January 6th in the certification process, which is what he does. Anyway, so he continues. President Trump's repeated pleas for Georgia's Secretary of State, Rafflesberger, I'm broadcasting here from Atlanta, Georgia, we know our Secretary of State, clearly demonstrates that his justification was not to investigate fraud, but to win an election. And he quotes one of the things that he said in a long call to Rafflesberger, all of which is public. He says right here, so what we're doing here, folks, question mark, I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break. Now, he takes that to demonstrate a corrupt mindset. But we all know that Trump, at least publicly, has stated he thought there was fraud in the 7 swing states to include Georgia. So if he goes to Rafflesberger, I don't even know how you could interpret that as being nefarious as this judge does. It sounds to anyone who's rational, it says, hey, we got cheated bigly in Georgia. There's rampant fraud. All I need is 11,000. You probably got 200,000 out there, Rafflesberger. Just all I need is 10 or 11 to flip the state. So again, imagine, folks, you've got all this evidence in front of you. You got clerks, you got the Benny Thompson, printing briefs and whatnot. This is the best you've got. It's to this thing that is clearly innocent. If you take it in context, it's innocent. Out of context, which it is here, it's still innocent. Anyway, so he continues down. Taken together, this evidence demonstrates that Trump likely knew the electoral count plan had no factual justification. What? You got to be kidding me. So you got 3 things here. Courts rejected it, a phone call with Brad Rafflesberger, right? And what was the first thing? Oh, yeah. Some aides told him there was fraud and other aides told him there wasn't fraud. Okay, that doesn't convince me of anything. All right. The plan only lacked factual basis. No, the plan not only lacked factual basis, again, now we're at the bottom here, bottom left, but also legal justification. Dr. Eastman's memo noted that the plan was, quote, bold certainly. The memo declared Dr. Eastman's attempt to step outside the bounds of normal legal practice when no longer playing by the Queensberry's rules. Now, folks, remember that. I want you to burn this in your brain right here. We're on the top right-hand corner. You can see me scrolling over it right here. Dr. Eastman's memo noted the plan was bold certainly. The memo declared Dr. Eastman's intent to step outside the bounds of normal legal practice We're no longer playing by the Queensberry's rules. Now, folks, they get away with this because they think no one's paying attention. Well, let's go back to Safari. And where's my Safari? Why is it not up? Let's tell me it didn't do this. I did. Okay, good. All right. Pulling back up my Safari. Let's go to the article I told you about. If you look here, you can find the Eastman memo. All right, so let's scroll down. He ruled. Where's the Eastman memo? There it is, right here in the article. Eastman memo, right here. I'm going to click on it, and bammo, up comes the Eastman memo. There it is. Modern technology. Got to love it. Let's scroll down to the end of the Eastman memo, and is that showing up? That is not showing up as well. Where's the PDF of the Eastman memo? That's not it. Come on. All right. Here we go, right here. There we go. Original document PDF. All right, now that's a better version. All right, here we go. So let's get what the judge did it. All right, let's read it again. Here it is right here. All right. I'm going to highlight it, and then I'm going to unhighlight it because it doesn't look as good. There it is right there. That's what the judge is referring to. All right. Now look how bad he takes it out of context. Bold, certainly. And then he goes, we are no longer playing by the Queensberry's rules. So the judge goes, bold, certainly, right? And then he skips and he goes, here. That's where he saw it. You saw it again. In fact, let me bring it up. I'll show you again. Notice where we were. Let's pull up our Microsoft Word. Boom. There it is, right there. Bold, certainly. And then he takes the end of it. So let's go back to the original Eastman memo. Folks, you don't have to do this if you've got the law on your side. You don't have to do that. Let's go back to the Eastman memo, and the Eastman memo is here. All right, this is what he actually said. Bold, certainly, but this election was stolen by a strategic Democrat plan to systematically flout existing election laws for partisan advantage. We're no longer playing by Queensberry rules, therefore. All right, so let's go back to the judge's opinion. He has taken that incredibly out of context. I don't know why he would do that. He doesn't need to do that. All right, because he's already said there was a corrupt intent, but he just tries to stick in one more thing, and it doesn't work out. So we go back to the opinion here. All right. So basically from there, he just continues on about Dr. Eastman and Dr. Eastman. Then he scroll down. He finishes with this. The illegality, again, there's nothing in here I'm trying to hide from you. Again, you can pull up the opinion. I've showed you how. You can read it yourself. He just goes on and on about the plan and Pence and all this stuff. Take two. The illegality of the plan was obvious. Our nation was founded upon a peaceful transfer of power, epitomized by George Washington laying down his sword to make way for democratic elections, right? Anyway, he just talks about how Trump vigorously campaigned for the vice president to single-handedly determine the results. That's not what happened. Go watch our video from last night. That's not what he was saying. Anyway, based on the evidence, the court finds it more likely than not that President Trump corruptly attempted to obstruct the joint session of Congress on January 6th. That's all they got, folks. That's what you're going to see this Thursday. If you tune in here, you'll see it with us. That's all they're going to have, okay? And let's go back just so we continue it here. I'm going to go through the other two, and then real quickly, I'm talking like 30 seconds. So basically, if we go back up, and I've brought back up, I did. Okay, so that was the first one. So he basically went through and said he obstructed Congress's proceeding to count the electoral votes. That was number one. Number two crime that he said that Trump committed was President Trump, plaintiff Dr. Eastman, and several others entered into an agreement to defraud the United States by interfering with the election certification process in violation of 18 U.S.C. 371. It's a very similar statute based on the same garbage evidence. He concludes the same thing, so that's going to be the second thing. Number three, he does say that he did not believe that Trump committed common law fraud. So, again, I guess that's a good benefit. So that's what you're going to see on Thursday, folks. You're going to see the committee trying to basically demonstrate that Trump committed fraud in that way. Now, you've got a sneak preview, and it's going to be boring, but I'm hoping it will backfire for a lot of reasons. I don't think a lot of people are going to tune in, but it's going to be interesting, and it's important. Imagine had the law been followed, right? And again, if you go listen to last night's video, understand that different law. But basically, you had 8 Republican senators, and you had 139 Republican representatives ready to object. Then they would have had to go back and debate. In all likelihood, it was a Hail Mary, okay? I mean, they call it the Green Bay sweep, but it's probably, I mean, I'm a big Cowboys fan, so I love the Hail Mary, obviously. It was a big win over the Vikings, but I digress. Anyway, it was a Hail Mary. Probably wasn't going to work, but it had a chance to work, and it had a chance to get the nation to understand what had gone on in the election and basically flesh it out nationally. But the media and the Democrats have just tried to bury this, and now they're basically, the big problem here, I don't think Trump's actually going to ever be convicted of anything here. I don't think January 6th is going to go anywhere. But the bigger problem, even bigger than the president, as bad as what happened to him is, the bigger problem is, first they get him. Now they're going to be able to come after anybody they want on obstruction charges. And this judge shouldn't do it for anybody. I mean, shouldn't do it for anybody. He shouldn't do it over anything. It's really sad that he did. But anyway, now you know Trump did not commit a crime. You now know and understand, based on the facts and the law here, why this judge found incorrectly that more likely than not that he did. And just before I finish, I want people to understand, right? If you were to have to charge Trump criminally with this, you'd have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. The standard here was just more likely than not, as you can see. So anyway, you should know that. So if you enjoyed this, please subscribe, snip it, share it, do all that good stuff. And if you enjoyed this, I hope you tune back into our next video.